Have you ever felt like a hotel room is hiding dark secrets, watching you when you're alone? What if a simple check-in turns into a nightmare that lasts forever? Get ready for a scary story that sticks with you, full of mystery and chills from start to finish. Chapter 1. The Man in Room 1046. The year was 1935, and the hotel president stood as a beacon of modest elegance in the heart of Kansas City, Missouri, its marble floors echoing with the footsteps of travelers seeking respite from the harsh winter winds whipping through the streets outside. On January 2nd, a man who called himself Roland T. Owen entered the lobby, his overcoat dusted with fresh snow, his face marked by a prominent scar across his forehead that twisted like a jagged lightning bolt under the chandelier's glow. He approached the front desk with hesitant steps, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting shadows to leap out at any moment, and in a voice barely above a whisper, he requested a room, specifying one without windows, an odd demand that made the clerk, a young man named Charles Blotcher, pause and raise an eyebrow before assigning him room 1046 on the 10th floor. Owen paid in cash, peeling off bills from a thin wallet with fingers that trembled slightly, perhaps from the cold or something more sinister lurking in his mind, and he signed the register with a flourish that seemed forced, his handwriting neat but hurried, as if time itself was chasing him. Carrying only a small black valise that looked worn from countless journeys, he declined the bellboy's offer to help and ascended the stairs alone, his footsteps fading into the carpeted hush of the upper floors, leaving Blotcher to wonder about the stranger's urgency and the faint aura of desperation that clung to him like cigarette smoke. That first evening in room 1046 unfolded quietly at first, the man settling in by hanging his few possessions in the closet, a suit jacket and a pair of trousers that smelled faintly of train stations in distant cities. But as night deepened, the hotel's tranquility shattered with peculiar sounds emanating from behind the door. Muffled voices rose and fell in heated argument, words indistinct but laced with anger and fear, prompting a neighboring guest to complain to the night manager, who knocked tentatively but received no answer, only a sudden silence that felt heavier than the noise before it. The maid, Mary Soptic, arrived the next morning with fresh linens, her cart squeaking down the hall, and when she rapped on the door, it cracked open just a sliver, revealing Owen's pale face, his eyes bloodshot and wild, as he snatched the towels from her hand and muttered gruffly to return later, slamming the door before she could glimpse more than a disheveled bed and scattered newspapers on the floor. Soptic later confided to her colleagues that she had heard him on the telephone during that brief exchange, his voice low and urgent, repeating the name Don like a mantra, perhaps pleading or accusing, the word hanging in the air like a curse that sent chills down her spine. She wondered who Don was, a friend, a foe, or something worse, but duties called her away, leaving Owen to his solitude, though the arguments resumed by afternoon, thumps against the walls shaking the plaster and drawing more complaints from adjacent rooms where businessmen tried to sleep off their hangovers and families hushed their children amid the growing unease. Venturing out briefly the following day, Owen stepped into the biting cold, his scarf wrapped tightly around his neck to hide whatever marks might lurk beneath, and he visited a nearby haberdashery, purchasing several neckties with cash, an innocuous buy that later puzzled investigators, as if he were preparing for a formal event or something far darker. Returning to the hotel, he looked even more haunted, his steps faltering as he climbed the stairs, and once back in room 1046, he barricaded himself inside, the lock clicking with finality, refusing all knocks except for the insistent ring of the telephone, which the switchboard operator Della Ferguson handled with growing apprehension. She overheard snippets of conversations, cryptic and tense, one caller demanding why Owen hadn't met at an appointed time, his tone sharp like a knife's edge, while Owen stammered apologies about delays and unforeseen complications, the line cutting off with an abruptness that left Ferguson staring at the switchboard, her hands cold despite the room's warmth. That afternoon, a woman in a striking red coat was spotted by the elevator operator ascending to the 10th floor, her heels clicking purposefully, and soon after, laughter filtered from room 1046, light at first, but quickly turning to sharp, biting words that escalated into shouts, culminating in her storming out, the door slamming behind her with such force that it reverberated through the hallway, startling a passing porter who caught a whiff of her perfume, mixed with the metallic tang of fear. Who was she? A lover caught in a web of deceit, or an accomplice in whatever scheme Owen was entangled in, her identity slipping away like smoke as no one thought to ask her name amid the hotel's daily chaos. As twilight descended, the disturbances reached a pitch fever, and around 10:30 p.m., the bellboy, Randolph Probst, discovered Owen slumped in the hallway outside his room, blood seeping from shallow stab wounds on his chest, neck, and abdomen, his wrists bound loosely with cord that he had partially freed himself from, his face contorted in pain as he gasped for air. Probst helped him back inside, where Owen collapsed onto the bed, muttering incoherently that he had simply fallen against the bathtub, a lie so transparent it only deepened the mystery, refusing to name his assailant even as blood stained the carpet and his breaths came in ragged bursts. The room itself was a scene of chaos, furniture overturned, lampshades askew, crimson smears on the walls and sheets, yet the door had been locked from the inside when Probst arrived, no weapon visible save for a shattered glass tumbler on the floor, shards glinting under the harsh light like accusatory eyes. Police were summoned, their boots thundering up the stairs as sirens wailed in the distance, and they questioned Owen in his delirium, but he offered only fragmented whispers about Dawn, his eyes glazing over with fever as infection from the untreated wounds began to spread through his body like wildfire. Transported to the hospital under guard, he lingered in agony, his true identity emerging through fingerprints as Artemus Ogletree, a 20-year-old from Birmingham, Alabama, with no apparent connections to Kansas City, no record of criminal activity, just a young man who had vanished from home months earlier, leaving his family to wonder if he had run from debts, love, or darker pursuits. Investigators scoured the room for clues, finding a cryptic note on the dresser, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The words matching Owen's script, but raising more questions than answers. Who was this Dawn? A phantom accomplice? A vengeful pursuer? Or a figment of a tormented mind? Witnesses emerged with tales of a burly man in a fedora lurking near the elevators that night, his face shadowed, slipping away just as the screams began. But descriptions varied, leads dissolving into dead ends as alibis checked out or memories faded. The hotel buzzed with rumors, guests whispering in the lobby about a jilted lover's revenge, a botched extortion plot tied to the underworld, or even a self-inflicted wound in a bid for sympathy that spiraled out of control. The air thick with paranoia as maids refused to enter room 1046 without escorts, claiming cold drafts and unexplained whispers that raised the hairs on their necks.
His body racked with convulsions from sepsis. Fevered ramblings accusing invisible betrayers of setting him up, his scar seeming to pulse with each labored breath until, in the pre-dawn hours of January 5th, he slipped away quietly, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling as if seeing ghosts in the fluorescent lights. The autopsy revealed layers of horror, not just the stabbings, but older bruises and burns, suggesting prolonged torture, perhaps hours or days of captivity within the locked room. Yet no foreign fingerprints marred the scene, only his own, fueling theories of a masterful setup or an internal demons driving him to harm. The case gripped Kansas City, newspapers splashing headlines about the mystery man in room 1046, with sketches of the elusive Don circulating but yielding nothing, as if the name was a code for something untouchable. Years later, in 1936, a woman in New York named Ruby Ogletree recognized her son's photo in a true crime magazine, confirming his identity and recounting how he had left home abruptly after a head injury that left the scar, perhaps altering his mind in ways that led to paranoia and dangerous associations. She received taunting letters postmarked from various cities, claiming Artemis was alive and well, having faked his death to escape debts. But handwriting analysis dismissed them as cruel hoaxes or perhaps diversions from the real culprit. Decades passed, the hotel president enduring renovations and name changes, but room 1046 retained its infamy, guests reporting eerie phenomena, cold spots that chilled to the bone, faint echoes of arguments replaying in the dead of night, and shadows flitting across walls where no light cast them. One investigator in the 1950s claimed anonymous tips linking the case to organized crime syndicates operating out of Chicago, with Don as a pseudonym for a hitman who silenced Ogletree for witnessing a deal gone wrong. But evidence crumbled under scrutiny, the file relegated to cold case archives where it gathered dust alongside other unsolved riddles. Even in modern times, true crime enthusiasts pore over the details, debating online if Ogletree was victim or perpetrator, his scar a mark of past violence or a clue to his fractured psyche, the note a desperate plea or a planted red herring. The woman in red remains unidentified, her role a tantalizing loose end, perhaps the key to unlocking the truth if only someone had noted her face amid the hotel's transient crowd. The mystery endures, a testament to how a single room can harbor endless darkness, where check-ins become traps and the walls absorb screams that echo through time, reminding us that some secrets are buried not in graves, but in the ordinary places we least suspect. In the end, Artemis Ogletree's story serves as a chilling, cautionary tale, proving that behind locked doors, betrayal can lurk in the form of a trusted name like Dawn, and a simple hotel stay can unravel into a nightmare from which there's no awakening, leaving only questions that haunt the living long after the blood has dried. Chapter 2: The Vanishing Patriarch. In the quiet suburb of Westfield, New Jersey, during the fall of 1971, John List lived as the picture of a devoted family man, his tall frame and stern glasses hiding a mind crumbling under the weight of failure and faith, each day a careful mask over the cracks forming in his soul. He worked as an accountant, but jobs slipped away like sand through his fingers, debts piled high like autumn leaves outside his window, and his grand Victorian home on Breeze Knoll Drive stood as a fading symbol of success he could no longer afford, its once polished facade now dulled by neglect and unspoken worries. His wife Helen suffered from syphilis passed from her first marriage, her health fading into dark moods and isolation that filled the rooms with heavy silence, while her elderly mother Alma lived upstairs in her small apartment, her sharp words a constant reminder of his shortcomings, echoing down the stairs like judgments from above. The three children, Patricia at 16 with her dreams of acting on stage, John Jr. at 15, full of youthful rebellion and strength, and Frederick at 13, still innocent and playful, filled the house with teenage energy, their laughter and arguments a stark contrast to the tension simmering beneath, unaware of the storm brewing in their father's heart as he watched them with eyes that saw not love, but impending doom. List attended church every Sunday without fail, his Bible worn from endless study and underlinings, believing in a strict Lutheran path where sin demanded harsh judgment and redemption came only through extreme measures. And as the bills mounted higher with each passing month, he began to see his family's imperfect lives as a burden he must erase to save their souls from the eternal fires he feared so deeply. He planned in secret for weeks, ordering a gun through the mail, a sleek 9mm Steyr pistol and a reliable .22 revolver, hiding them in the basement among old boxes and forgotten tools, practicing his aim late at night with targets pinned to the wall, the muffled pops echoing like distant thunder in the empty space, his face calm and composed as he imagined the acts ahead, rehearsing each step in his mind like a solemn ritual. Helen noticed his odd hours and withdrawn demeanor, asking once over a tense dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes why he seemed so distant lately, her voice frail and tinged with concern. But List brushed it off with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes, his voice steady and reassuring despite the chaos swirling inside his head like a gathering storm. On November 9th, a crisp morning with golden leaves crunching underfoot and a chill in the air that hinted at winter's approach, List waited patiently until the kids left for school, their backpacks slung over shoulders as they called goodbye from the front door, their voices fading down the driveway. Then he approached Helen in the kitchen as she sipped her morning coffee slowly, her back turned to the large window where sunlight filtered through delicate lace curtains, casting patterns on the linoleum floor. He raised the pistol without a single word of warning or farewell, firing once into the back of her head with precision, the shot muffled by the house's thick, insulated walls, her body slumping forward onto the table in an instant, blood pooling amid the breakfast dishes and spilling over the edge like a dark omen. He dragged her limp form carefully to the spacious ballroom at the rear of the house, laying her out on a clean sleeping bag with almost tender care, as if tucking her in for an eternal rest she never asked for, his hands
Then
steady
he climbed the
despite
creaking
weight
wooden
of what he had
stairs
done.
to his mother's apartment, where Alma stirred from her armchair by the window, her knitting needles paused mid-stitch as she looked up with mild surprise, her eyes widening in confusion and then horror as he aimed the gun squarely at her face and fired again without hesitation, the bullet striking her just above the left eye, her frail form collapsing back into the chair without a cry or protest, only the soft thud of her body settling into silence. With the house now eerily silent except for the rhythmic tick of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, marking time like a heartbeat, List cleaned methodically and efficiently, wiping surfaces with a rag dipped in bleach to erase any traces of struggle, arranging the scene with the precision of an accountant balancing ledgers, and turning on the radio in the living room to pipe soft religious hymns through the empty rooms, the choral voices rising and falling like an eerie backdrop to his grim task, filling the air with words of salvation that mocked the bloodshed. He sat at his desk then, the wood polished from years of use, and wrote long, detailed letters to his pastor explaining his actions as an act of mercy and divine intervention, claiming he spared them all from the shame of poverty and the temptations of sin, sending their souls straight to heaven before earthly ruin could claim and corrupt them further, his handwriting neat and unhurried, as if composing a business report rather than a confession. Another note canceled the milk delivery for the foreseeable future, and he made calm phone calls to the children's schools to say they would be away visiting extended family out of state, buying precious time for his escape into the unknown, his mind already racing ahead to a new life unburdened by the past, envisioning himself reborn far from the blood-stained walls. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floors, Patricia returned first from her drama club rehearsal, her laughter echoing brightly in the front hall as she called out for her mother with excitement about a new play script. But List met her at the door with a gentle smile, leading her unsuspectingly to the ballroom,
under the pretense of a family surprise waiting inside, then shooting her swiftly in the head from behind as she turned away, her body crumpling to join Helen's on the cold floor without a chance to scream. Frederick arrived next from his after-school soccer practice, his cleats leaving muddy tracks on the pristine rug that List would later clean, his face flushed with exertion as he kicked off his shoes, and List repeated the act with cold efficiency, the boy's wide-eyed confusion turning to blank stillness in an instant as the shot rang out. John Jr. came home last from his part-time job at the local grocery store, his muscles toned from sports and labor, making him stronger and more alert than the others, and when he saw the gun in his father's hand and the unnatural quiet of the house, he fought back fiercely in a desperate struggle that left List bruised and panting, furniture overturned in the scuffle as they grappled across the room. But List fired multiple times into his son's chest and head, the shots ringing out sharply until the teen lay still at last, blood staining the carpet like a final accusation against the man who raised him. With all 5 bodies now arranged neatly in the ballroom, side by side on sleeping bags like a macabre family portrait frozen in time, List covered them respectfully with clean white sheets, except for Alma, whom he left upstairs in her chair, perhaps out of some twisted sense of respect or separation from the others. He ate a simple dinner alone at the kitchen table that evening, a sandwich and glass of milk consumed without taste, the hymns still playing softly in the background like a soundtrack to his solitude. Then packed a modest suitcase with essential clothes, personal documents, and the remaining cash he had hidden away, driving off in the family station wagon under the cover of deepening night, the headlights cutting through the darkness as he headed west toward an uncertain future. Neighbors noticed nothing amiss for weeks afterward, the house lights flickering on and off via automatic timers to simulate normalcy, mail piling up unnoticed on the porch, the lawn growing slightly unkempt but not alarmingly so, until Patricia's drama club friends grew worried about her prolonged absence and alerted the police with tentative calls. Officers finally entered the house on December 7th after forcing the locked door, the stale air thick with the unmistakable stench of decay mingling with the faint scent of bleach, and the endless loop of religious music from the radio still droning on like a ghostly chorus, discovering the bodies in the chilled ballroom where time seemed to have stopped, the scene so orderly and composed it chilled them to their cores more than any chaotic crime scene ever could. A nationwide manhunt began immediately, with flyers distributed and tips flooding in, but List vanished without a trace, assuming the new identity of Robert Peter Clark, moving first to Denver, Colorado, where he found steady work as an accountant once more, blending seamlessly into the fabric of middle-class suburbia with his unassuming demeanor and fabricated backstory. He attended a local Lutheran church regularly, where he met and eventually remarried a kind woman named Dolores Miller in 1977, living a quiet, unremarkable life in a modest ranch-style home filled with ordinary routines, his past buried so deep under layers of lies that even he sometimes forgot the blood on his hands during peaceful moments. The couple relocated to Midlothian, Virginia in the 1980s for his job, where List cooked dinners, mowed the lawn, and participated in community events. His neighbors described him as polite and reserved, never suspecting the monster lurking behind the facade of normalcy he had so carefully constructed over the years. The case gripped the nation for decades, headlines screaming of the List family massacre in tabloids and newspapers, with wild theories circulating about mob connections, mental breakdowns, or even supernatural influences. But List's own letters left behind revealed his cold, calculated logic, a man who viewed murder not as evil, but a necessary salvation for those he claimed to love. For 18 long years he evaded capture, his face aging but his habits unchanged, until America's Most Wanted television show aired a special segment on May 21, 1989, featuring an age-progressed clay bust
sculpted by renowned forensic artist Frank Bender. The receding hairline, wire-rimmed glasses, and distinctive jawline rendered with uncanny accuracy that made viewers pause.
A neighbor in Virginia named Wanda Flannery recognized Bob Clark from the broadcast almost immediately. Her suspicions confirmed by the scar on his abdomen from surgery mentioned in the profile, and she tipped off authorities anonymously, leading to his swift arrest at his accounting firm, where FBI agents surrounded him mid-workday, cuffing his wrists as shocked colleagues looked on. Dolores was stunned into disbelief, collapsing in tears as the truth unraveled, her husband's double life exposed like a wound reopening after years of healing. In court during his 1990 trial, List confessed without a shred of remorse, claiming steadfastly that he acted out of misplaced love to spare his family the humiliation of financial ruin and spiritual downfall. His testimony delivered in a flat, emotionless tone that unnerved the jury, resulting in 5 consecutive life sentences without parole at New Jersey State Prison, where he spent his remaining days in quiet reflection, dying of pneumonia complications in 2008 at age 82, never once expressing genuine regret for the lives he shattered. The Breeze Knoll house, scene of the horrors, burned down mysteriously just months after the murders in a fire ruled as arson by investigators, some speculating it was set to destroy lingering evidence, others whispering of restless ghosts too tormented to allow the structure to stand. To this day, the story haunts the quiet streets of Westfield, where locals avoid mentioning the address, a chilling reminder that evil can wear the most familiar face, planning meticulously in the shadows of everyday domestic life, turning a loving home into an inescapable tomb overnight without warning. Survivors, like distant relatives and former friends, pondered the warning signs missed over the years. Helen's untreated illnesses brushed aside, the children's bright futures stolen in moments of madness. But List's masterful vanishing act proved how one man could methodically erase his entire world and rebuild from the ashes, leaving behind only faint echoes of horror that time can dim but never fully silence. The religious hymns he left playing on that fateful radio became the stuff of local legend, as if the dead themselves sang eternal warnings to the living, a haunting melody drifting through an empty house where betrayal lingers like acrid smoke in the air, impossible to clear away completely. Chapter 3. The Inn of No Mercy. In the fog-shrouded village of Colnbrook, nestled along the winding, mud-churned road from London to Bath in the turbulent 1500s, the Ostrich Inn loomed like a sentinel amid the swirling mists. Its ancient timber beams, weathered by centuries of English rain, creaked under a thick thatched roof that sagged like the shoulders of an old crone. To weary travelers, merchants on horseback, pilgrims on foot, or nobles in rattling coaches, the inn promised sanctuary, a roaring hearth to thaw frozen limbs, tankards of foaming ale to quench parched throats, and beds that whispered of dreamless rest. But beneath this facade of rustic warmth lurked a darkness as deep as the nearby brook's murky depths. John Jarman, the innkeeper, was a hulking figure with a barrel chest and arms like knotted oaks from years of chopping wood and hauling kegs. His grin was wide and toothy, flashing like a predator's lure, but his eyes, cold, slate-gray orbs, betrayed nothing of the void within. Beside him stood his wife, Kate, a woman of deceptive softness, her ample frame swathed in aprons stained with flour and grease. Her smiles were honeyed, her laughter a melodic chime that drew guests in like moths to a flame. Yet those same eyes, sharp as daggers, scanned every newcomer for glints of wealth, a jeweled ring catching the firelight, a bulging purse clinking with silver, or fine fabrics whispering of fortunes made in distant markets. To the villagers of Colnbrook, the Jarmans were pillars of the community, generous with scraps for beggars, quick to offer credit to locals in lean times. But hushed rumors circulated in the alehouses and around the well, tales of prosperous strangers who entered the inn's welcoming doors only to vanish into the ether. Their horses would be found days later, grazing aimlessly in nearby fields, saddles empty, bridles dangling like forgotten nooses. Bandits, the villagers muttered, blaming the lawless highways where cutthroats ambushed the unwary. Highwaymen haunted the woods after all, their blades thirsty for blood and coin. No one dared point fingers at the Jarmans, whose inn bustled with life and whose cellars overflowed with provisions. Yet the truth festered like a hidden wound. The inn's best chamber concealed a mechanism of pure malevolence, transforming hospitality into a ritual of horror. Deep in the inn's bowels, John had engineered a diabolical trap, born from whispered legends of medieval tortures and his own twisted ingenuity. The chamber boasted a grand bed, its frame bolted firmly to the oaken floorboards, adorned with plush feather mattresses and heavy velvet curtains that muffled the world outside. Hidden hinges allowed the bed to pivot silently, triggered by a concealed lever in the kitchen below. A pull of that iron rod, and the bed would tilt at a deadly angle, flinging the slumbering guest through a trapdoor into the abyss. Beneath waited a vast copper vat, perpetually simmering over a banked fire, filled with boiling water that could scald flesh from bone in mere heartbeats. John had tested it meticulously, first with sacks of grain that plummeted with a dull thud, then with stray animals whose muffled yelps he silenced swiftly. He oiled the gears obsessively, ensuring no creak or groan betrayed the contraption, even to the lightest sleeper. Kate played her part with chilling precision, her kitchen a stage for seduction and sabotage. She brewed special ales laced with potent herbs, mandrake root and hemlock extracts that induced a heavy, unnatural drowsiness. Her stews, rich with venison and root vegetables, masked any bitter aftertaste. As guests dined, she regaled them with tales of local folklore, her voice a soothing lullaby, all while stoking the flames beneath the cauldron, the water's bubbles a sinister prelude to the night's grim symphony. It was on a tempestuous night in 1577 that fate delivered Thomas Cole to their doorstep. A seasoned cloth merchant in his mid-50s, Cole had journeyed from the bustling markets of London, his saddlebags heavy with proceeds from a lucrative sale of fine woolens and silks. Rain lashed the countryside like a scourge, turning the road into a quagmire that sucked at his horse's hooves. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the inn's sign, a faded ostrich swinging wildly in the gale, as Cole reined in his weary mount. He tied the beast to the post, its flanks steaming in the downpour, and pushed open the heavy oak door, water streaming from his woolen cloak like tears from a mourner's eyes. The common room enveloped him in warmth, the crackle of logs in the massive stone fireplace, the earthy scent of peat smoke mingling with roasting meats, and the low hum of conversation from a handful of patrons huddled over their mugs. John Jarman materialized like a shadow given form, his massive hand clapping Cole's shoulder with feigned camaraderie. "Welcome, good sir, a foul night for travel. Our finest room awaits. Dry linens, a feather bed to cradle your bones. Only a shilling for such comfort." His voice boomed, echoing off the low-beamed ceiling.
Kate glided from the kitchen, a steaming bowl of stew in her hands, her apron dusted with flour like fresh snow. "Sit ye down, traveler. This'll chase the chill away." Her smile was radiant, her green eyes sparkling as she poured a frothy tankard of their house-special ale. Cole settled gratefully by the fire, his boots leaving muddy prints on the flagstones. He savored the stew's savory warmth, the broth thick with onions and herbs, and sipped the ale, its malty sweetness masking the subtle bitterness beneath. As he regaled the room with stories of London's teeming streets, the cries of vendors, the opulent gowns of court ladies, his gold chain necklace gleamed enticingly in the flickering light. Across the room, John and Kate exchanged a fleeting glance, their eyes alight with avarice, like wolves spotting a lame deer. Upstairs, the best chamber awaited, its air thick with the scent of beeswax candles and fresh rushes scattered on the floor. Cole admired the bed's solidity, running a hand over the carved headboard depicting hunting scenes. Ironic, he thought idly, given his own pursuit of trade. He undressed methodically, folding his damp clothes over a chair, and tucked his purse, bulging with gold sovereigns, beneath the pillow for safekeeping. The wind howled outside, rattling the leaded windows, but within, the curtains created a cocoon of false security. The drugged ale worked its magic. His limbs grew leaden, his thoughts foggy, and he slipped into oblivion, dreams of his cozy hearth at home flickering like dying embers. In the kitchen below, the inn fell silent save for the patter of rain and the distant snores of lesser guests in the common hall. John checked the hour by the guttering candle, his face a mask of anticipation. Kate, wiping her hands on her apron, nodded resolutely. With a soft, oiled click, she yanked the hidden lever concealed behind a false panel. Upstairs, the bed lurched silently, hinges pivoting with mechanical precision. The trapdoor yawned open like a maw from hell, and Cole plummeted into the void, his body twisting in midair before splashing into the roiling vat. The boiling water engulfed him in agony, scalding his skin raw in an instant, bubbles exploding around him as his flesh blistered and peeled. Any scream died in his throat, choked by steam and shock, his final moments a blur of searing pain and darkness. Above, the bed reset itself with a faint whisper, the mechanism flawless, the room pristine once more. John descended the narrow stone steps to the cellar, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid steam of cooked meat. Using a long iron hook, he fished out the bloated corpse, its skin sloughing off like wet parchment. He stripped it methodically, the gold chain, the purse heavy with coins, rings from swollen fingers, all piled into a hidden chest. Then came the axe, its blade honed to razor sharpness, thudding rhythmically against bone and sinew as he dismembered the remains. Kate assisted without flinching, wrapping bloody parcels in oilcloth, her face impassive under the lantern's glow. Under the cloak of night, they slipped out the back door, the storm their ally as thunder masked their footsteps. The nearby brook, swollen by rain, rushed with furious energy. They hurled the bundles into its depths, watching them bob and sink, carried swiftly towards the Thames, where currents and scavenging fish would obliterate all evidence. Back inside, they scrubbed the vat with lye, the routine as familiar as baking bread. This macabre dance had claimed over 60 souls, merchants, nobles, even a wandering priest whose disappearance sparked fleeting inquiries. The Jarmans amassed a fortune, fencing stolen goods in far-off towns, jewels reset in new mounts, coins melted and recast, horses sold at distant fairs. The inn's reputation for comfort only grew, drawing more victims into their web. Villagers occasionally wrinkled noses at peculiar odors wafting from the chimney, a charred, fatty scent reminiscent of overdone pork, but Kate dismissed it with laughs about her experimental recipes. Missing travelers? Blame the bandits, the wolves, the treacherous bogs. But Thomas Cole's horse sealed their fate. John had untethered it at dawn, expecting it to wander off as others had. Instead, the loyal beast lingered, whinnying plaintively near the inn, its saddlebags still strapped, drawing curious eyes from passing farmers. Word spread like wildfire in Colnbrook, a fine steed matching the description of a merchant seen entering the Ostrich the night before. The local constable, a grizzled veteran named Elias Thorne, had long harbored suspicions. Too many vanishings traced back to this stretch of road, too many empty saddles. Rallying a posse of sturdy yeomen, he stormed the inn under the guise of a routine search. The Jarmans protested vehemently, John's face reddening with pretended outrage, Kate's tears flowing like a practiced actress. But the men were thorough. They discovered the lever behind the kitchen panel, pulling it to reveal the yawning trapdoor above. Descending to the cellar, they recoiled at the blood-stained vat, still radiating heat, flecks of flesh clinging to its rim. Hidden compartments yielded damning troves, sacks of coins, tangled necklaces, rings engraved with family crests, relics of the damned. Villagers emboldened came forward with suppressed memories, muffled cries swallowed by storms, odd thumps echoing through walls, glimpses of shadowy figures hauling burdens in the witching hour. Bound in irons, the Jarmans were hauled to the assizes in Reading, where a stern judge presided over their trial. Crowds packed the courtroom, the air thick with anticipation and the stench of unwashed bodies. John, under the shadow of the rack, confessed with eerie detachment, recounting each murder as if tallying ledger entries. "Greed, my lord, not devilry," he intoned, his voice steady. "A man's purse weighs heavier than his life in these hard times." Kate, shackled beside him, sobbed hysterically, pointing accusatory fingers at her husband. "He forced me, the brute. I had no choice." But witnesses dismantled her facade, serving girls recalling her gleeful counts of spoils, neighbors overhearing her jests about boiled guests. The verdict was swift, death by hanging. In Colnbrook's muddy square, under a leaden sky, a gallows rose like a skeletal finger. The crowd jeered as John mounted the steps, his burly frame unbowed. The noose tightened, the trapdoor dropped with a bang, and his neck snapped like dry kindling, his body twitching in death spasm. Kate followed, her struggles more desperate, legs flailing wildly as the rope choked her pleas, her face purpling until stillness claimed her. Their corpses dangled for days, swaying in the breeze, a grotesque warning etched in every passerby's mind. The Ostrich Inn stood forsaken, its windows shuttered, doors barred with iron. Locals whispered of hauntings, beds creaking in empty rooms, the phantom bubble of boiling water, spectral splashes in the cellar. Appearances flickered at dusk, Cole's tormented face at the window, or Kate's shadowy form stirring a ghostly pot. Travelers shunned Colnbrook, opting for longer routes, while the brook occasionally yielded grim treasures during floods, yellowed bones tumbling ashore, polished by time and tide. Centuries on, historians poring over dusty court records and ledgers of fenced goods estimated the toll, 62 confirmed, perhaps more lost to obscurity. The site reborn as a quaint pub, but the legends endure, a chilling reminder that beneath smiles and warm hearths, traps may lurk. In the Inn of No Mercy, trust was a fatal indulgence, greed a cauldron that boiled away souls, leaving echoes of terror in the mist-veiled night. No welcome was safe, no rest eternal, only silence, sudden and scalding.